Alex Fاتانكا, Senior Fellow at the Middle East Institute. Thank you for joining me today.
Great. Thank you for having me.
So, in 2021, you wrote a book titled The Battle of the Ayatollahs. Now Khamenei is dead, his son Mushtaba and the new leader is wounded and invisible. Who governs Iran today?
Yeah, I mean, the book, The Battle of the Ayatollahs, I wrote obviously when Ali Khamenei was still alive. And the purpose of that book was to show then an already kind of opaque, hard to discern policy-making process in Tehran. And I tried to tell the story of how we got here. This is a few years back, by following Ali Khamenei in terms of from 1979 onwards, his rivalry in particular with the then Ayatollah Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani. So I was telling a story about the rise of Khamenei, why he became the ideologue that he became, so fixated on certain issues like his position on the United States, on Israel, on dealing with the domestic protesters in Iran over the course of his 36 years in power. And it was very kind of interesting and difficult to find the sources to tell that story. But I'm a Persian speaker. I know how to read between the lines, and I kind of thought that book project would be of interest. So I pursued it, and I hope I was able to shed some light on the decision making process back then. But now, with his son taking over, if I had a problem back then trying to figure out how the opaque system works, today that job is arguably 10 times harder.
Yep.
Obviously, the Islamic Republic is still in power. And Mujtaba has now become his father's successor. He's hiding, and he has good reasons to hide, because most likely the Israelis or even maybe the Americans might at some point decide to go after him, to assassinate him, just like they assassinated his father. But today, Iran is still pretty much run along the lines of the system as Ali Khamenei helped shape during his almost 4 decades in power. It's the combination of the Revolutionary Guards, who are probably the most important center of power today, together with other security services. That includes the Ministry of Intelligence. It includes certain powerful economic networks. So I would just say, in summary, the death of Ali Khamenei was not the death of the Islamic Republic. It could become that in the long term going forward. But as of today, the 86-year-old Khamenei is dead, replaced by his son, 56-year-old Mujtaba. The Revolutionary Guards have more power today than they had a couple of months ago, but they also had power a few months ago. So I think it's an exaggeration to say Iran has suddenly become militarized. Yes, the IRGC has more power, but they also had power before this war broke out. So we are not in a very radically different place in terms of personalities. We could be in a radically different place in terms of policy choices that the regime will make going forward. Why? Because they just encountered the biggest military conflict in the history of the Islamic Republic. That will shape their calculations. I don't know which way they will go, but that's the area to watch, what decisions they will make for their own survival going forward.
Do you think Mushtaba Khamenei is now merely a symbol behind the IRGC who really controls the country?
Mujtaba Khamenei was not on the short list to become supreme leader. I know for many years, many people mentioned him, and many, including myself, said for many years Mujtaba is unlikely to take over. The only reason why Mujtaba took over is because the war broke out.
Yeah.
And there was an urgent need to have continuity and replace Ali Khamenei. And the Revolutionary Guards pushed his candidacy and made him supreme leader. Without this war, Mujtaba Khamenei would not have become supreme leader, most likely. His father, by most accounts, didn't want him to become his successor. Now, that is, in a sense, a leadership in symbolism for now.
Mm.
But it's very important to remember, in time, as he will politically mature, if the regime survives, he will have more say over the runnings of the regime going forward. Not next week, not next month, but in months to come. That's exactly what happened with his father. It takes time.
Do you think the arrangement will be like supreme leader, but like, you know, the supreme leader is no longer supreme? Like you still, you know, have like different branches of power in military, IRDC, and they will compete for influence. What do you think of that?
No, I think you could say that way. You can say he's supreme leader in name, but in reality, he needs the backing of at least the Revolutionary Guards, if not other interest groups. But then one quick point I make: his father had the same issue back in 1989. Ali Khamenei took at least 5 or 6 years before he was comfortable and confident to start really, politically operate in a way that started shaking things up. He didn't do it day one. It took him a number of years. The same will probably be true, if not more so, for his son, Mujtaba.
And he sidelined everybody, his father. I think no one was, in Iran at some point had any clout to compete with him, right?
Ali Khamenei did try and sideline everyone. Mostly he succeeded, not always, but it's important to remember he couldn't do it from get-go. I say that for the following reason. The office of the supreme leader in itself doesn't necessarily give you all those extensive powers. It's the personality that occupies the supreme leader's office that also matters. The same, by the way, is true for the presidency in Iran. Who is president matters less than whether that president wants to fight for his political agenda. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, he wanted to fight. He wanted to be a powerful president. To some extent, he succeeded, and then he failed, and he got marginalized. Pezeshkian is not doing that. The current president is a weak president. He doesn't fight. So in many ways, the personality of who sits in the office of the supreme leader or who sits in the presidential office also matters.
So in addition to Mujtaba Khamenei, who's running the show? Can you highlight specific names?
Look, I think in an Iranian case, and I know a lot of people in the West look at impersonalities, I think, frankly, that is an exaggeration of how the Iranian system works. Personalities do matter, but what matters much more are networks. The Revolutionary Guards are essentially a network, but within that network, you have different factions, mini networks. They're not always in agreement. The Supreme Leader's office, presumably Mujtaba will need some time to select his advisors, but we know from Ali Khamenei's time as Supreme Leader, not everybody was in agreement on issues. So, for example, these days in Western media, they talk about the latest head of the Revolutionary Guards of Ahmad Vahidi as very different than the Speaker of the Majlis, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, that they clash, that they're in disagreement about what they're negotiating with the Americans. I think most of this is speculation on part of Western media. We don't have any hard evidence that Ahmad Vahidi and Ghalibaf or Abbas Araghchi, the foreign minister, or Masoud Pezeshkian, the president, that they have fundamental disagreements. We know they have disagreements. We've always known there are disagreements, but there are no fundamental signs of big disagreements in terms of, for example, whether to prevent war in the short term, if that can be done. So I would just say on the question of who runs Iran, not focus too much on individual personalities, certainly not now with Ali Khamenei, the biggest personality gone, and look for networks and what interest they have. Iran had Ayatollah Khomeini from 79 to 89. His voice really mattered. I mean, he could literally start a war and end a war. Ali Khamenei couldn't do it first, but at the end of his life, he could, for example, go and agree for negotiations with the Americans, or he could be against it, and that mattered. Today, Mujtaba Khamenei has no such power. Maybe in 5 years' time, 10 years' time. So it's a mistake to look at personalities. It's much more important to look at interest groups, these networks, and what they want for their future.
So the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz now is costing Iran 400 million a day. Trump says he's prepared to hold it for months. What is the Iranian breaking point in your perspective?
Nobody knows what will happen with a blockade. Is it hurting Iran? For sure. Has Iran been here before? No. Iran didn't even experience anything like this during the Iran-Iraq war when Saddam's air force were hitting Iranian shipping throughout the second part of the war. So this is uncharted territory. The Iranians have never been here before. They're going to hurt, and they're going to hurt as time goes by. But if the Americans think that the blockade's going to collapse the Iranian economy in a week or 2 weeks, they're mistaken. This is a regime that's been under sanctions for decades. They know how to go around sanctions. That said, sanctions are much easier to deal with than a blockade. A blockade is a physical obstruction to trade. That's very different. That means you're dealing with the US Navy. So Iran is going to have a very difficult task ahead in terms of breaking the blockade. They have to look north to Central Asia, to Caucasus, to Turkey, to Iraq, to maybe Afghanistan, Pakistan, other countries to go around the blockade. 90% of their trade is maritime, which means they need to shift that number towards land-based trading, and it will take time to replace, historical trading routes with alternative routes is possible, but it will take time. And in the meantime, the Iranian economy will pay the consequences of that change in direction of trade.
Do you think the United States is betting on having, the Iranians go to the street and try to pressure the regime and topple it at some point?
I think that's always part of the U.S. policy options. Whether the American side thinks that a blockade will necessarily result in a revolution in Iran, I'm sure there are some Trump advisors who hope that might happen. But I think most of them probably would agree that the Iranian regime is worried about the impact of a revolution. So in that concern, that pressure alone is hoped here in Washington that puts the Iranian decision makers in a place where they're forced to think harder about what kind of concessions they're willing to give to the United States for a diplomatic solution to be found.
So I want to move to the Pakistani role in this negotiations between Iran and the United States. So in 2017, you wrote about this triangle, in a book on Iran and Pakistan, security, diplomacy, and American influence. And I think you're one of the best people to answer a question related to this triangle. So Pakistan brokered the ceasefire, hosted the talks, and is now the only channel keeping both sides from returning to war. How did Pakistan get there?
Number one, I would point out that it's really too early to sort of be able to measure exactly what role Pakistan played. Obviously, historians will look at what happened, but what we do know in terms of the big picture is Pakistan is a country that has cordial relations with Iran, has always had cordial relations. Despite tensions, they even went to war briefly for a few hours, if you remember, in 2020. Early 2025, if I'm not mistaken. So cordial, but with tensions. But Pakistan also has very good ties with the Gulf countries, particularly Saudi Arabia, historically, and that remains true. And the Pakistanis, at least this administration of Prime Minister Sharif and Field Marshal Munir, they have the ears of Donald Trump. In any way, you could make the argument that the circumstances really came in and created a moment for Pakistan to offer its services. And that has basically been the reason why the Pakistanis have been able to play this role. It's not that they have any specific leverage over the Iranians. They don't. They trade limited volumes with Iran. Their economic ties are not the reason why the Iranians accepted Pakistan as a mediator, but it's also because the alternatives weren't necessarily there. Countries like Oman and Qatar that had played the role of mediator couldn't play that role because they were really in the middle of that war between US and Iran, since the Iranians were targeting all the Gulf countries in their retaliation. So Pakistan found this unique spot. And final point I make about Pakistan, and again, this is something historians will have to explore and find the sort of answers to, is the role that China played in this, because China is very close to Pakistan. And we need to sort of wonder if the Chinese also perhaps put the name of the Pakistanis forward to the Iranians and said, if Trump accepts Pakistan as a mediator, you should do as well. So again, we will find out more in due time. But let me just say this. I can't remember Pakistan playing such a significant diplomatic role in the last many decades. So this is certainly a moment for Pakistan to cherish, has certainly put it on the diplomatic map.
So do you expect a return to open conflict, to military strikes by the US and Iran?
Who knows what will happen? But a return, limited return. I don't expect a big war. I think the Trump administration doesn't show any desire to do that. All the signs are they're looking for a way to end this war. But they could end this war with one sort of major, limited, but major set of attacks on Iran again. And then President Trump can declare that Iran's nuclear program is now finally forever done. And then he can try and get himself out of this war. That's what he wants to do. But obviously, what we don't know is Iranian retaliation. What kind of retaliation could we expect from Iran? And would that then make it impossible for Trump to walk away? That is not his decision. That would be Iran's decision.
So you think there would be some limited, military action from the US? Not a full-scale operation?
Not a full scale, not 40 days, but I think it's very likely, or I should say at least it's likely, that we can expect more military action on the part of the US against Iran and Iranian retaliation, unless something on the diplomatic track moves.
Yes, because there was a report, I think, by Axios saying that there might be a plan to take over part of the strait.
Yeah, I don't think that's what the US wants to do. I don't think the US wants to occupy anything or militarily commit on that level. We're talking airstrikes mostly. Because one thing that the United States has learned from Afghanistan and Iraq is once you start actually getting in terms of boots on the ground and occupying, then that becomes a very slippery slope, and your mission very quickly will expand, and you'll be in a larger war than you had anticipated. And that's exactly the threat that President Trump and his team are very concerned about, and that's why they haven't, for example, taken the Hark Island despite weeks of saying they would take it, or putting special forces on the ground around the strait. They haven't done that because they don't want it to become a sort of a slippery slope and forcing the U.S. to prolong the conflict, which clearly the Trump administration wants to end as soon as possible.
So, given the scale of war, the leadership losses, the economic pressure, many expected internal unrest in Iran. But what is puzzling is that the Iranians didn't go into the streets. Why? What is the reason in your perspective?
Look, I don't think anybody will question the fact that this Iranian regime is hugely unpopular between its own people. Now, I know lots of video footage from Tehran shown on Western media channels oftentimes show that the supporters of the regime on their streets. And they are there, and they're in the millions. But in a country of 90 million, they have maybe 20% support, 15, 20% support. So it's significant, but it's not a majority. In fact, is a minority, and a small minority, I would say. So it's not because the regime is popular. The reason why people don't come to the streets is because this is also a regime that has proven again and again it's willing to kill its own people to stay in power. And on top of that, if you're risking your life as an ordinary Iranian to come to the streets, what do you actually know in terms of where this is going to go? The lack of political organization by the opposition is really a major problem here. So people are asked to risk their lives for something that's unknown. The idea of free secular Iran is something that I think the mass majority of Iranians would love to see, but they haven't seen the pathway to it. They don't see how you're going to get there. And there are leaders out there who are saying this can happen, but they're not showing how. And until you can show people how you're going to bring Iran from a theocracy to something that is secular and free, then a lot of Iranians are not willing to risk their lives for untested theories.
Yes. Well, Alex Fatankà, Senior Fellow at the Middle East Institute, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure.